to him. This is it.
Hello everyone, my name is Alex and my topic today is on obesity. My claim is that obesity is the biggest and deadliest problem in America right now. Obesity is simply defined as the condition of being overweight, but there's clearly more to it than that. I first want to go over the massive number of consequences that come with obesity, then how obesity is affecting nearly half of our country's population, and lastly how obesity is essentially the leading cause of death in our country. So going back to the first point, the number of consequences that come with obesity are massive. The UCLA Medical Center actually recently stated that obesity is far more dangerous than most people think and has been linked to the causality of over 70 different illnesses, including cardiovascular and lung disease, heart attacks, strokes, various forms of cancer, and many more. Additionally, obesity can also have a significant negative effect on everyday life. The World Health Organization has done many studies on obesity, one of which being sleep and how individuals who are obese have a poorer quality of sleep and complained of daytime tiredness more so than their fitter counterparts. They also found that infertility and sexual dysfunction are both risk factors found in obese individuals. On top of that, it's kind of self-explanatory as to why carrying around excess weight also interferes with the quality of life. It's difficult to move around when you carry a significant number of extra pounds, and the wear and tear on your hips, knees, and joints can cause daily pain and lead to arthritic changes. Because of the impairment of bodily function, the causality of multiple illnesses and problems in everyday life, the American Medical Association recently decided that obesity should be classified as a disease a few years ago. Considering it took classifying obesity as a disease for the legal system to take it as a serious matter, I think it's safe to say that the number of consequences that come with obesity are serious and legitimate. Moving on to my second point, obesity is growing rapidly and showing no sign of stopping, and it already affects nearly half of our country's population. The Center for Disease Control recently reported statistics of 93.3 million adults in the U.S. being affected by obesity, and that number continues to rise as we speak. That's nearly 40% of the population in the U.S., and children aren't even included in that statistic. The Center for Disease Control also has a separate set of stats for children. If they're 2 to 19, then the prevalence of obesity is 18.5% and affects about 13.7 million children. This number also continues to rise and even contributes to the stats of adults in the U.S. because children who are obese tend to stay that way all the way up into adulthood. The Center for Disease Control has been doing these annual surveys for a while, and if you compare the stats of the U.S. to stats of the U.S. now compared to 1990, the difference in overall growth of obesity in our country is ridiculous. In 1990, every state in America was around 10 to 15% obese, with the average being 11%. Comparing these stats to recent years, there's pretty much been a 20% increase, with every state in America now being approximately 30% obese, which is pretty telling since it's rising in numbers and there's no sign of stopping. Professor Clem McPherson from Oxford University estimates that 3/4 of the American population will be obese by 2020, and 41% of men will be obese and 36% of women will be. And by 2050, it's just going to continue to rise until over 80% of the U.S. is overweight. Moving on to my last point, obesity is essentially the leading cause of death in America. Technically, that title belongs to heart disease, but obesity plays a huge part in this. In the U.S., heart disease accounts for almost 1 in every 4 deaths, and it accounts for 23.4% of the annual deaths in America. Heart disease is a term used to describe several conditions. It's mostly have to do with plaque buildup in the arteries, which obesity causes because it makes it more difficult for blood to flow, and it creates a risk for heart attacks and strokes. And the CDC says the only thing that can prevent heart disease is lowering blood pressure and cholesterol and making dietary modifications, which obviously is basically being fit and adjusting obesity. Obesity is seen as the main cause of heart disease by many, and for good reason too. And for the other leading causes of death, it's strokes, forms of cancer, Alzheimer's, kidney disease, influenza, and diabetes. Obesity plays a major part in every single one of these causes, and it just causes general unhealthiness in the body and promotes each of the diseases that I just listed. And the CDC lists dietary modifications and physical fitness and activity as the best prevention of these illnesses. And despite contrary belief, drug use, firearms, automobile accidents, they don't do nearly as much damage as obesity does because Obesity promotes all of the diseases that are killing the majority of people in the US annually. So overall, I believe obesity is the deadliest problem in America because of the number of consequences obesity comes with, how many people it affects and will affect, and how it's essentially the leading cause of death in this country. Thank you.
Smart ass. All right, let's get to the elephant in the room immediately, which is not an obesity joke. It's really a reference to the fact that there's something that's a little bit problematic about this, and that is I'm not sure that anybody disputes most of this stuff. Nobody is challenging that obesity is a healthy thing for people to do. Almost everybody acknowledges that obesity increases the risk of death from a variety of diseases. The factual data on how widespread obesity is not challenged by anybody. So 90% of what you're talking about is really an informative presentation. And in fact, the way the secondary claims are labeled in the preview, they're presented as expository claims rather than declarative statements. There is a proposition that's got two parts to it. It's phrased like a proposition and like it's a proposition of fact, but like as I was saying, it really feels more like it's simply describing something that is true, not making any inference. I'm not sure what inference is being drawn in any of these particular points. There might be an argument about why we are obese, or what the best way to address obesity is, or whether or not obesity is something that is a component part of the culture that we live in. Like I said, there's plenty to argue about concerning the issue of obesity. You know, its sources, its answers, that kind of thing. But its harms, that's not where the dispute usually is on this issue. And that's really what your speech is all about, the potential harms of obesity. And so, you know, the answer that the response speaker is going to have to deal with is arguing that some of the other diseases are tied to obesity, but maybe not caused by obesity. That's about the closest I can come to thinking of something that might be, you know, a dispute for them to deal with. You've got a lot of information in the presentation. It's not as if there's a shortage of data. It's just the argumentative part of the issue is that's where the problem is. It's reasonably well organized, like I said before, except of course that those secondary points are presented as expository type statements rather than inferences, and I think that's a bit of a problem. The delivery issue that I'm going to mention is not something that I'd notice other people doing, so it's a little bit unique to you. You are leaning on the desk, and it's like you're getting ready to, you know, dive off of a diving board a little bit, and that looks a bit awkward. I know that you're just trying to do it to be comfortable so you can get down and see the notes in front of you, but it doesn't really engage the audience, and it's a little bit problematic. It seems to suggest some anxiety issues that you want to control in other ways. That's not something that we focused on a lot on, but it's something that's, I think, is worth mentioning in this particular context. I thought you had a good summary at the end of the speech. So like the technical stuff on organization, that's all solid. The citation of information, that's all solid. But the theoretical stuff about the nature of argument, that's where there's the problem. All right, thank you.